From Washington to Moscow, from New York to Paris, from Rome to Jerusalem, around the world, the prophecies of the Bible are being fulfilled. J.R. Church, author and lecturer, is standing by with today's analysis of Bible prophecy. History has reached an impasse. The world is soon to see the return of Jesus Christ. And now, here is J.R. Church with today's Prophecy in the News.
By every standard of measurement, the 20th century will go down in history as the incredible century. The 1900s began with a limited use of electricity, without radio, television, planes, missiles, without electronic computers, modern weapons, and atomic bombs. Technology has now moved man into a modern era, which witnesses more change in the course of a year than formerly took place in a century. Gigantic manufacturing complexes have arisen. Millions of people have moved from the rural areas to the city. Modern travel has shrunk the world so that everyone is everyone else's neighbor. Luxuries, comforts, and pleasure, unknown in previous generations, have become commonplace. The electronic media has brought wars and disasters, world leaders and propagandists directly into our living rooms. Television transmission via satellite now makes it possible for all the world to experience swiftly changing events simultaneously. The shock of rapid change, in turn, has produced family and social crisis, tension between nations, fear of atomic war, and struggle for survival in a world threatened by pollution, starvation, and moral disintegration. The rapidly increasing tempo of change in modern life has given the entire world a sense of impending crisis. Civilization is moving at a rapidly excelling rate, like a gigantic machine which will ultimately tear itself apart. How long can a world exist with atomic bombs unused, with increasing population and decreasing food supply, with growing moral degeneracy threatening to destroy our civilization? How long can world tensions be kept in check? How long can a world struggling for survival be kept from a bloodbath? The ingenuity of man has devised means of human destruction which would seem incredible to a previous generation. The world is moving toward a gigantic crisis. Can it be that the prophets of doom are right? Is the world racing toward Armageddon, a divine judgment on a wicked world, the end of human history? Prophecy has never been the sole domain of astrologers, mystics, and crystal ball gazers. For centuries, Christians have considered the message of true prophets to be God's revelation of His plan for human history. The Old Testament books record the lives and works of many great prophets: Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Micah, and others. These men predicted future events in vivid detail, including the rise and fall of every major world empire which left its mark on the Middle East. Some of their predictions came true within their lifetimes, and many of their astounding predictions seem to be coming true today. Jesus Himself assumed the role of a prophet when He quoted from Moses, Isaiah, Daniel, Jeremiah, and Micah, many times adding interpretive comments and detailed predictions of His own. His words have been confirmed by the test of time. Jesus' prediction of the fall of Jerusalem in Luke chapter 21 is so vivid that the early church in Jerusalem was able to escape almost certain destruction by fleeing the city before Titus destroyed it in 70 A.D. As it was then, even so it is today. Crucial predictions about Jerusalem and the nation of Israel are, in fact, necessary to understand the carefully predicted chain of events which will mark the last days of our civilization. Jesus predicted the persecution of the church, the fall of Jerusalem with the destruction of the temple, the shattering and scattering of the Jews to all the nations of the world, and He predicted the amazing survival and growth of churches. along with the Old Testament prophets, he saw a time when Israel would be reestablished as a nation. All this has been realized in history. But he also warned those who understood the Old Testament prophets to watch Jerusalem and the Middle East for signs of the approaching end of world civilization, the end of the times of the Gentiles. Jesus said in Luke 21:24 that the Jews shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. The Jewish people are now back in the land. Jerusalem, the city of dispute and negotiation, was won in 1967, only to become the object of a diplomatic tug of war. What is the future for the holy city? If the times of the Gentiles are in fact nearing an end, what will happen next? Is there a sure word about tomorrow? Is it a word of hope or a word of doom? People are asking questions today about the future as never before. They are solemn questions, and they are searching questions. Only the Bible has clear answers. For this reason, biblical prophecy has been probed and is being probed for clues today as to where we are in God's program and what great events may be shortly coming to pass. Prophecies, formerly brushed aside as being incredible, are now being studied again. Students of the Bible are becoming increasingly aware of a remarkable correspondence between the obvious trend of world events and what the Scripture predicted centuries ago. People in all walks of life and of all religious faiths are asking the same question: what does the future hold? Unlike the self-proclaimed prophets of today, the prophets of the Bible did not peddle vague and general predictions that could be adjusted to any situation. The prophecies recorded in the Bible are detailed and intricately interwoven. Although interpretation of minor points may vary, the overall picture is frighteningly clear. The Bible does not simply speak of a final destructive world war, but of a series of carefully timed events on a doomsday calendar leading to Armageddon. Armageddon has come to describe anyone's worst fear of the end of the world. The prophets have described it more specifically as the final suicidal battle of a desperate world struggle centered in the Middle East. This is the final act in a terrifying series of events which are very much related to today's headlines. This final history-shattering battle will occur on schedule at a specific time and in its predicted location. The name Armageddon actually comes from a Hebrew word meaning the Mount of Megiddo, a small mountain located in northern Palestine at the end of a broad valley. This valley has been the scene of many military conflicts in the past and will be the focal point of this great future conflict. The final countdown involves years rather than days. Even before the countdown, several preliminary moves which are predicted in the Bible will shake the political, economic, and religious climate necessary for end-time events. These preliminary moves are now falling into place in rapid succession. As these moves are completed, a more specific timetable of events can begin. The final countdown involves a brief period of preparation plus 7 more years, possibly 3.5 years of comparative peace and 3.5 years of unparalleled disaster and war, climaxing at Armageddon. A careful study of history and the Bible is necessary to put the Armageddon calendar together. The reestablishment of the nation of Israel in the Middle East was the necessary start. Then came the series of Israeli-Arab wars threatening to bring the United States and Russia into direct clash over the Middle East. Prophecy seems to indicate that Israel will not be destroyed by war. Instead, Israel will eventually be betrayed and forced to accept an outside settlement at the peace table. the current peace negotiations between Israel and Egypt may culminate in the rise of the Antichrist and the establishment of a false peace. Armageddon may be that near. I predict that as Armageddon approaches, belief in supernatural, mystical, and bizarre phenomena will grow from fad and superstition to a stampede of fear. Books, magazines, and movies about witchcraft, demons, and Satan worship will soften the Western consciousness. Claims of demon possession and exorcism will be increasingly in the news. One factor which will have a traumatic effect on the world will be the fulfillment of what theologians call the rapture of the church, the sudden removal of every Christian from the world. This will fulfill the promise of Christ to his disciples when he said in John 14:3, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. At this time, Christians who have died will be resurrected, and every true Christian living in the world will suddenly be removed into heaven without experiencing death. The disappearance of millions in a moment of time will deepen the religious confusion. The organized church, with every Christian removed, will fall into the hands of political opportunists. Witchcraft, Satan worship, and demonism will become increasingly prevalent throughout the world. World leaders will seek alliance with religious leaders to consolidate their powers in a modern culture as strange and mystical as the Dark Ages. World events during these days are setting up the stage. But the precise countdown of 7 years will begin with the signing of a final peace settlement in the Middle East. During the preliminary moves, the international balance of power will become more and more concentrated in a confederacy of Mediterranean and European nations. The European Common Market, established some years ago and expected to come into full fruition by 1980, is believed by Bible students and students of prophecy to be that confederacy. In fact, the European Common Market is expected to establish a unified monetary system by 1980. Now, I'm not saying that 1980 will see the beginning of the tribulation period, but the events of these days, including the peace negotiations between the Israelis and the Arabs, looks mighty suspicious. From the many negotiations, the leaders involved in the Middle East, I think there will arise an international leader, one man who will eventually emerge to superimpose a peace settlement on the Middle East and the more militant Arabs. This will bring an era of false peace, a move toward disarmament, and a major push for a new world economic system. In the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, I think the picture will be as a calm before the storm, as this new world leader consolidates his power. The last 3.5 years will contain a series of almost inconceivable catastrophes. Somewhere during this menagerie of prophetic events, Russia will attempt a final bid for power in the Middle East, and her armies will be supernaturally destroyed. The balance of political power will then swing decisively to the new strongman, controlling the world confederacy. As Satan's man of the hour, he will attempt to destroy Israel, who will then be disarmed and at peace. In the fashion of the Babylonian and Roman emperors, he will deify himself and demand the worship of the world. Jews, professing Christians, and minorities of all kinds will be caught in a worldwide persecution that will exceed Hitler's methodical massacre of the Jews during World War II. The world will begin to come apart at the seams, worse than any ecologist's nightmare. Acts of man and acts of God will combine to cause great disturbances in the world and in the solar system. Meteors will plummet to Earth, wreaking destruction, and planets will run off their courses, causing chaotic changes in climate. Unnatural heat and cold, Flooding and other disasters will wipe out much of the food production of the world. Great famines will cause millions to perish. Strange new epidemics will sweep the world, killing millions in spite of all that modern medicine can do. As the period draws to a close, earthquakes will level the great cities of the world, and geographic upheavals will cause mountains and islands to disappear into the sea. Disaster after disaster will reduce world population in the course of a few years to a fraction of its present billions. Topping even these disasters will come a world war of unprecedented proportions. Hundreds of millions of men will pour into the Middle East in a gigantic world power struggle. The Middle East will become the scene of the greatest war of history. Great armies from the south, representing the millions of Africa, will pour into the battle arena. Other great armies from the north, representing Russia and Europe, will descend on Palestine. Climaxing the struggle will be millions of men from the Orient, led by Red China, who will cross the Euphrates River and join the fray. Locked in this deadly struggle, millions of men will perish in the greatest war of history. This is what the Bible describes as Armageddon. But before the war is finally resolved and a victor determined, I'm happy to say that the Lord Jesus Christ will come back in power and great glory from heaven. His coming, accompanied by millions of angels and saints, is described in graphic terms in Revelation chapter 19. He will destroy the armies of the world, set up his own kingdom, and rule the earth as King of Kings. A peace settlement in the Middle East is one of the most important events predicted for the end time. The signing of such a peace treaty may start the final countdown leading to Armageddon. It may also introduce the new world leader who will become destined to be a world dictator, the infamous Antichrist. According to Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, the last 7 years leading up to the second coming of Christ will begin with just such a peace settlement. The same passage describes a covenant to be made between the nation of Israel and the prince who will rise to power. While the details of the covenant are not given, it will be an attempt to settle the Arab-Israeli controversy which has focused world attention on the Middle East. It may well take the form of a forced peace settlement in which Israel returns much of the conquered land in exchange for strong international guarantees for Israel's safety and prosperity. Scriptures describe a world situation not unlike what we have today, preceding such a peace settlement. For instance, there will be an alignment of 10 nations. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 7, this is symbolized by 10 horns on a beast that represents the last world empire, the Roman Empire in its final and revised form. Many interpreters of Bible prophecy have felt that the common market of Europe will be a fulfillment of this predicted alignment of 10 nations. The confederacy of 10 nations must have the political and economic power necessary to control the Mediterranean. In the final analysis, this will be a confederation including both economic interdependence and military alliance. The trends of international intrigue in Europe and the Middle East clearly point to the necessity of an alliance of nations to bring peace and economic prosperity to that area. Changes necessary to make the present situation conform to the prophetic anticipation of Daniel could take place rapidly in today's world. Certain conditions, however, are absolutely necessary before the final peace settlement can occur. First, Israel has to be back in the land before such a peace treaty would be possible. Israel's return to the land in 1948 and her recognition as a political state constitute an important first step. The military conflict and constant turmoil ever since have set the stage for just such a peace treaty. What form will the coming peace settlement take? In view of the many surprises in the Middle East, it is hazardous to predict the precise form of such an agreement. Whatever its preliminary form, ultimately it must give Israel security from attack and freedom from the constant state of military defense. A general disarmament in the area may also be a part of the agreement. The key issue in the negotiations will be the city of Jerusalem itself, which Israel prizes more than any other possession. Undoubtedly, there will be a strong attempt to make Jerusalem an international city, with free access not only for Jews, but for Christians and Muslims as well. How soon will such a peace settlement come? No one can hazard a guess. But come it must. Here, the Scriptures are clear. There will be a covenant between the emerging world ruler and Israel. It will be a covenant which will permit Israel to continue and to renew her religious ceremonies, including the reactivation of Jewish sacrifices. All of this was anticipated in the prophecies of Daniel 9:27 and was implied in the prophecy of Christ himself relating to the stopping of sacrifices when the covenant is broken. In Matthew 24:15, Jesus said, "When ye therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, then let them which be in Judea flee unto the mountains." Yes, Armageddon is only a matter of time, and the world is rapidly moving toward that conclusion. Today, Israel and Egypt are attempting peace negotiations. These negotiations may eventually bring about a peace covenant prophesied by Daniel. When the peace is finally made, it will be observed for only 3.5 years. It is destined to be broken and bringing devastating consequences for the world and terrible persecution for Israel. The breaking of the covenant will mark what Christ called the Great Tribulation, a time which Jeremiah referred to in Jeremiah 37 as the time of Jacob's trouble. The final persecution of Jews during the time of Jacob's trouble will waken Israel and waken their understanding to what has taken place. All the hopes and illusions of the past will be stripped away. This clear fulfillment of prophecy will lead to the startling realization that the first coming of the Messiah is past and that his second coming is near. In the horror of the last 3.5 years of tribulation, these new believers will cling to the hope of Christ's second coming. Jesus prophesied that he would not come again until Israel would say, "Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord." And so, there will be no permanent peace until the Prince of Peace, the Lord Jesus Christ, returns in power and great glory to reign over the earth.